1. What's good, everyone? Coach Damien here from the Shift Method. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day. And by the time you're watching this, it'll be 2023. It'll be the new year. So happy new year to everyone. Hope you had a wonderful holiday. Hope you all got to celebrate, got to have a good time with friends and family. And so, yeah, we're going to kick off 2023 with an amazing podcast. One of my longtime friends who's been on a couple times. She doesn't really need an introduction, but I'm going to let her briefly introduce herself. And that is Hannah. Hannah, can you go ahead and introduce yourself to the people, please?
Yes. Thank you. I'm so glad to be back again for the third time now,
Yes.
I think, right?
Repeat.
Oh, so awesome. But yes, I am a dietitian and personal trainer. That's how I met Damien, was through personal training back at Purdue University. Boiler up.
That's right.
I currently work, yes, boiler up always. I currently work clinically a little bit as a dietitian, but I mostly would call myself a dietitian more so in my private practice side of things. I kind of think as my clinical job as my side hustle. Hopefully no one that I work with hears that on here. But anyway, my private practice, I focus a lot on intuitive eating. I call myself an anti-diet dietitian. So, ditching the diets, getting rid of food morality, going beyond the scale, things that you'd see if you even skimmed my Instagram page would be kind of front and center. But yeah, I mostly am working on all of that all the time. Social media is a big thing that I'm always on. TikTok, Instagram are the biggest ones. I see some clients. But yeah, I would just say Dietitian Hannah is kind of who I have become the last few years.
Yeah, she's been, crushing ever since, pandemic times, coming out of school, using her RD with great work and really doing what I call funjucation, where you go on TikTok and Instagram, you'll have a hell of a laugh and maybe even challenge some of your views that you might have on food. And like Hannah talked about with intuitive eating and diet culture, around weight loss, weight gain, etc. So there's a lot of really good resources. I'll be sure to plug all her stuff, including your podcast, which, if you enjoy listening to my podcast, yes. Her and Emily, another registered dietitian, do a podcast, and it is some great things to listen to. So I'll make sure to link all that and our other podcasts that we've done, because we covered some really good topics in the past. But for today, of course, we're going to talk about seed oils. It's kind of a brief conversation, but I think it's something that within, I'd say the last, really, I'd say 6 months to a year, with people like the Liver King, which I know you talked about extensively, and some other, I'll call them, fitness people online that you see. The seed oil controversy has really kind of grown in popularity. And so I know for the general public, including fitness professionals, it can be quite confusing, because you see these people who have maybe some credentials like degrees, or they might have a medical degree, or maybe they have some background in nutrition and they're saying seed oils are bad, or they're kind of taking a spin from the ketogenic diet or the carnivore diet, and they're trying to tell people that eating seed oils is not good, and et cetera. So we're going to kind of break down the ins and outs and get a RD's perspective on all this. So hopefully I'll be able to chime in here and there, but Hannah's really the one who has all the awesome expertise. I feel like to kind of lay the groundwork for this conversation, it's always good to bring up just in general, what fat is, because we're going to throw around a lot of terms monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, saturated fat. And so before we kind of dive into that conversation, I think it's good to lay that framework down. So Hannah, just kind of briefly, can you do a little review on what fat is, and then kind of some of the differences between the saturated, the unsaturated, et cetera?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the big ones that we often hear about, especially when the seed oil conversation comes up, is saturated versus unsaturated fats. So it all comes down to how they're classified is based on the organic chemistry of it all. So the fats that are super tightly packed, they have no double bonds. If you want to get really into the nitty gritty, those are our saturated fats. So those are the ones that you typically would experience that are solid at room temperature. So butter is a really popular example. The fat that you would see on a cut of steak, really any animal product or any fat that would be from an animal product would be a saturated fat. So like I said, butter, dairy, the fat you would get in a whole milk would be a saturated fat. This is the one that's usually classified as the bad fat, which I have air quotes if you're not watching, you're just listening, because I don't love to use the words good and bad when it comes to these kind of foods. As I'll kind of explain probably frequently throughout this. But anyway, our saturated fats are the ones that we do want to have less of than are unsaturated, because they are really well known to be a cause of cardiovascular disease in large quantities. And there is a huge genetic component there as well, which again, I'll talk about probably a few times in this as well. But that's the first one. And then we do also have the unsaturated, which on the other side of things, they're not quite as densely packed. And so that leads to them chemically having a liquid structure at room temperature. So that would be like your olive oil, avocado oil, peanut oil, your seed oils. And those are ones that are more well known to be more heart healthy. So we do want to eat more of those, generally speaking, than our saturated fats.
Gotcha. And yeah, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong on the recommendation, it's like the good rule of thumb for saturated fat, outside of genetic factors, like you mentioned, is roughly keep about 10% of the diet of less than saturated fat.
Yeah, I think that's the American Heart Association, they're kind of always changing it. I actually was looking recently, I can even look right now, I'm sure come really quickly. I saw recently someone said like 5 to 6%. And I was like, that just seems really low.
That is quite low.
So what I often tell like patients and clients is 10% is I think appropriate recommendation for sure.
Gotcha. And, I want to give them some credit if there is some room around it. So I've seen kind of hit and miss things about it. So I wanted to get your take. What are some, if any, like physiological benefits to saturated fat? Is there a hormonal health component? Is there a, general, fats have benefits, so consuming them can have benefits generally as a fat? Or is there something unique to a saturated fat that is actually health promoting in small doses?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have a really good answer for, honestly. I'll have to look more into that. It does have the general fat benefits, which I didn't really explain much about that. So fat, if you don't know, is one of our 3 macronutrients, along with carbs and protein. And fats are really great for keeping us satisfied for a long time. So that's why it's always great to have a fat along with protein at our meals to keep our blood sugar stabilized, keep us full, all those great things. They are playing a role in our hormone health. They have a lot of things that they do that make fat a necessary part of the human diet, which is why the low fat craze in like the 80s, 90s, whenever that was not so hot, because we need fats.
Mm-hmm.
But to speak about the positives about saturated, I truthfully don't know if there are. I guess I think the reason I don't have a good answer is I don't have a feed that features the carnivore people who are always spewing out the benefits of it. So truthfully, I don't know a whole lot of them. I need to look more into that for sure. Do you have any that you've heard of, like big benefits?
The ones that I've heard is a little bit about when usually they talk about butter, and I think it's pronounced tallow, where they'll say, it may have benefits. And again, it could be, mechanistic data, but it could have benefits for men with boosting testosterone naturally. But a big red flag goes up anytime someone says isolation of a hormone going up acutely, because it's like, you can do a lot of things to boost hormones acutely. So like that kind of, I'm like, on the fence about, but I didn't know if like animal product based fat maybe had a little bit of a benefit or proposed benefit that you may have heard of compared to like a poly or mono unsaturated fat from like vegetable sources.
Yeah, truthfully, no good answer there. I wish I had a better one, but I'll need to look into that more, because I know it is talked about a lot right now for sure.
All good. And see, people, that's what I respect. That's one of the many things I respect about Hannah. There's one shit that I don't know off the top of my head. And guess what? You don't know everything off the top of your head. So who cares? Right. And I know Hannah probably text me sometime next year, be like, hey, I found some stuff. It's probably
absolutely.
Cool. Okay. So that's good that we kind of have a little bit of a framework. And yeah, that's, my kind of understanding of like the saturated fat game, which is, hey, in moderation, there's certain aspects of our food that are going to have it. It is okay. Of course, there's a huge genetic component, kind of like with cholesterol for lipoproteins, where, some people can eat, my family, I'm very fortunate. Most of my family eats eggs their entire life, and we don't really have any pro-inflammatory markers or issues genetically. And so cholesterol isn't really a factor, whereas some people, they may eat a very low cholesterol diet and they still have cholesterol issues. So genetics plays a huge role. But of course, large quantities of saturated fat in the diet does seem to be prothrombotic, have some issues with atherosclerosis, cardiovascular disease, et cetera. So majority, good recommendation, limit those to somewhere between the 5 to 10% range. Now, getting kind of into the seed oil talk. So for those who don't know, kind of like Hannah mentioned a little bit earlier, seed oils could be things like olive oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, things that are going to come from primarily plant-based sources. And so the claim that I always hear, Hannah, is that these oils in particular, through some mechanistic data, may have adverse health outcomes. What's kind of your understanding when it comes to seed oils and health in general?
Yeah. So I made a list. There's like 5 big ones that I always hear. And I want to kind of like go through, if it's cool with you, and like talk about the 5 big ones. So I'll kind of list them off right off the bat so the listeners know what they're getting into here. But the first one that I hear all the time is that seed oils are inflammatory. I hear that one
that's the big
constantly. That they are highly refined and processed, just the whole processed foods in general claim that those are so terrible for us. That's a big one as well. There's the one about like hexane being used mostly with canola oil for production. And so people, especially the carnivore people, are saying canola oil is basically like motor oil.
Yes.
So we're being fed industrial oils. Yep. That one's big. GMOs, claiming that seed oils are made of GMOs and therefore unhealthy, which I think we discussed GMOs, Emily and I did last time we were on, right?
We did, yes.
Okay, so plug that episode.
Will do.
And then we kind of already debunked this one, but the last claim is the one about the animal fats, the claims that the animal fats are better than the seed oils.
Yes.
Are those the big ones you'd usually hear too, do you think?
Yes, the big one that I definitely heard is the pro-oxidative or pro-inflammatory. And then like what you said with canola oil specifically being used as a motor oil is like the kind of the big ones I've heard. I've also heard, and this is probably another conversation I want to have you on for, is like there's the anti-vegetable place. Like there's people who are like pro-fruit because they're like, it's the flower of the fruit and you can eat it, blah, blah, blah. There's people who are going to say that I've heard say vegetables are bad because they release, I don't remember the chemical off the top of my head. When you try and eat a plant, they release some chemicals and then they take mechanistic data and say that you are basically poisoning yourself through these phytotoxins because you're eating a plant that is trying to essentially not let you eat it in the moment. So that it's kind of falls into that category as well.
Exactly. And someone you guys got to follow along with Damien and I, that really debunks this better than I ever could is Food Science Babe. Do you follow her, Damien?
I do not, but I'll make sure to plug her in here and check her out.
Food Science Babe. She is amazing. She is a food scientist, chemical engineer, I believe. And seed oils is actually a big hot topic for her. She debunks all the time. She's actually who I learn probably the most from on this side of stuff, all this food sciencey things. But she's awesome. I recommend her a lot. She'll go over all those different things. And I'm sure she's debunked the whole vegetable thing too. But anyway, the inflammation is definitely the biggest one that I hear. And it's because the claim comes from those omega-6 fatty acids that you would see in some unsaturated fat sources. But the biggest thing before I even get into like the linoleic acid and all the stuff that I'm going to use to debunk it, someone or no one can call, or how do I want to say this? If anyone ever tells you that a food is inflammatory, they better also be able to tell you which inflammatory biomarkers are involved and the quantity of that ingredient or like chemical that would cause inflammation. Just saying
and how that
is like generally inflammatory is not
long term. Exactly.
Bingo. Exactly. So they better have a whole lot of like evidence and all that to back that up.
Absolutely.
Which it seems that there is not a whole lot of evidence to back up this claim that seed oils are inflammatory. In fact, quite the opposite has been shown to be true. The big claim, again, is those omega-6 fatty acids. One of the omega-6 fatty acids is linoleic acid, and it is known to, when broken down, turn into arachidonic acid. And this arachidonic acid can be a building block for molecules that can promote inflammation, blood clotting, constriction of blood vessels, all that good stuff, or not so good stuff, actually. But what's problematic, or I guess not so problematic because it's a good thing for us, but what's problematic for those making the claims is that the body can also convert this arachidonic acid into molecules that can fight inflammation and fight blood clots. So this arachidonic acid that everyone's so scared of can do a little bit of both. It's not just leading to inflammation over time.
That's hilarious. That's why I think mechanistic data you always have to take with. Like, I think mechanistic data should be used to form general hypotheses, right? So, like, for example, you see this marker, linoleic acid, and so in theory, it's like, this seems to have and I heard you say a lot of can, right? So it's like it can cause some oxidative stress or some pro-inflammatory stress, which we know long-term chronic inflammatory stress can be bad, but okay, then can we take that and apply that in data and in clinical trials and see, does that actually hold up true? And you're right. And like, I'll be sure to plug some of these studies that I have with the lanolinic acid, side of things. When you take or compare canola oil versus animal product fat, or even to olive oil, it seems that it tends to be positive across all dimensions for blood markers, things like total cholesterol, LDL, HDL, some pro-thrombotic markers that you might have in your blood tend to go down. So it just seems to be positive. So even though in a vacuum, and some of these studies that try and support that claim, it's like in vivo or in vitro, even though like it may sound nice on paper, when you actually apply it to real people in like dietary trials, the outcomes are positive in their direction. So it doesn't seem like it stacks up well, the mechanistic data, when you actually put it into people's diet.
Exactly. So yeah, I guess bottom line with this one is we just simply don't have enough data that supports the idea that omega-6 fatty acids are going to increase inflammatory markers. And in fact, we do have data that supports the opposite.
Yes.
And it could actually be very helpful, especially when compared to excess intake of saturated fats.
Boom. Check off that one. I like it.
Boom. Okay. So the other claim is the highly refined processed claim, the canola oil, or I say canola oil because it is a seed oil, and that's the one that is usually the most demonized, at least in social media posts that I see. But anyway, seed oils generally are demonized for being highly refined and processed. And this processing can lead to, or so claimed, can lead to these unsaturated fatty acids to oxidize, and that can lead to harmful byproducts. But the truth is that these oils are heated. They are heated during processing to a temperature at which the heat can drive off volatile compounds. But this is actually like a good thing. The reason this has to be heated is so that it's more stable. It has longer shelf life. This is why like a canola oil has like a really, really high smoke point. And the general claim of like a processed food is a bad food, we should be eating less of those, is just, I think, what's the word I want to use to classify this? Kind of classist in some cases, to tell someone they should never eat a processed food. Think of like baby formula, for example. That's a very highly processed food, but it's very necessary for mothers who either can't breastfeed or choose not to breastfeed. So I know baby food and canola oil aren't the same, but processed foods in general should not be demonized on their own.
Absolutely. I like that you bring that point up. It's very easy to say that when you make six figures and that you go to Whole Foods every day for shopping. I'm not saying everyone makes these claims does, but it's very easy to say don't eat processed food when you have access to never touch a semi-processed food at all. And I think Emily and I talked about this when we did our podcast together. It's like, why is everyone like these same people who say that like processed foods are bad for you are like the same people that are like, the human body's resilient, we can adapt and overcome stuff. But like, you can't handle a slight modification of a food that feeds millions of people, keeps people out of hunger and poverty across the world. But a slight modification to help its shelf life is going to be bad for you. Like those things just don't add up in my head. So I get kind of like confused when I hear that claim.
Exactly. Or they say don't eat processed foods, but take my supplement that is unregulated and we have no idea. I made it in my basement. But it's totally fine.
Isn't that funny, man? And like I have heard like what I think the term is like hyper or ultra processed, like meats can be like if you have like a lot of smoked meats, like every day for multiple years can have some like possible carcinogen effect. But like that's a rare example where like who's eating smoked meats like beef jerky or like heavy barbecue food like every single day for decades. Like it's kind of rare for that to happen,
Exactly. That's kind of the common theme of this whole episode. Is just like the dose makes the poison. We cannot just say like one particular food, ingredient, chemical, whatever is going to cause any issue on its own. That's just not how bodies work, thankfully.
Absolutely. That makes sense to me.
Man, I'm getting all fired up already. Only halfway through. Not even halfway.
Hop on TikTok, Hannah. I'll wait.
Oh my gosh. I know. I haven't actually discussed this much on social media yet. So this is my debut of seed oils.
Oh, there we go. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, should we go to number 3? 3 of 5?
Let's do it.
Okay. So the next one's about the hexane. So they call, like, I'll use canola oil for the example for this one. I need to like classify these people, the influencers, the carnivore people.
Yeah.
I don't know what we want to call them, but
I like it.
those guys, they'll call like canola oil an industrial seed oil, because of the way that hexane is used in production. And this is true. Like hexane is used to extract the oil from plants. This is what seed oils are. Seed oils are oils from plants, and hexane is used to get that out. But this is a very, very efficient process. I've been doing this for a very, very long time. And the hexane that is used is then like taken out, which is also part of the processing, which we love processing. That's why we have like the foods that we have in this day and age. So the like we have seen, I have to find a study to link because I can't just like say we have seen like I'm the one that saw this, but my understanding is that we consume very, very little of this hexane. And in fact, any hexane that we as a total population are consuming is very low from food sources, and we get it more just from like gasoline fumes. Like we're more likely to get excess hexane intake from being exposed to gasoline fumes than we are from gosh darn canola oil.
Gotcha. Yeah, that kind of, this isn't really a one-to-one comparison, but I'll try and make this as best as I can. That kind of makes it sound like that a food can't have multi-purpose use, or a product can't have multi-purpose use. Like, for example, I know it's, I use it myself. Yes. Yeah. Like I use a coconut based body wash. I just like how it smells. It makes my skin feel good. So like, I would never say that if you eat coconuts, you eat a soap based product, that is meant for your body and for washing your skin. I'm sure there's other examples of how we use food or food byproducts for like cleaning or cooking or whatever, but that doesn't mean that it can't be multi-purpose.
Exactly. And I meant to lead with that. Hexane, yes, is used in this, but that does not tell you anything about the canola oil itself. It's just how it's used to process. Like think of like water. Like water is also used frequently in like so many industries beyond just like hydration, but we're never going to say that water is this like toxic processed chemical we shouldn't be consuming.
No. Yeah. You have water in your toilet and you use it when you go to the bathroom. So like, therefore you shouldn't drink water, period. Like you shouldn't drink the water in your toilet, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't drink water, dude. Like that's not a one-to-one. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Cool. That makes direct. Yeah. I heard the motor oil thing. I was like, there's definitely some person pulled one thing and they're like trying to say like, this is motor oil. You're eating motor oil. It's like, oh God, just please stop.
Exactly. Also we have like grades of food. So like the level or like the type of oil that motor oil is not food grade, but canola oil is food grade just based on how it's processed, the amount of like hexane, for example, that's in the product. Like they might have similar properties, but they're very different. And no one's going to encourage that you eat motor oil.
Yeah.
Because they're different grades of food or
Absolutely.
not food, different grades of oil.
Yeah. 100%. Okay. Yeah. 3 down. What's number
3
4?
down. GMOs is the next one. So like we said, we did discuss GMOs. Emily and I did on a previous episode, which is super duper fun. But the claim is because seed oils are sometimes made with GMOs or they are a GMO, that they are therefore unhealthy. But as we mentioned in the previous episode, we discussed GMOs. Those aren't inherently a bad thing. GMOs are actually a very helpful thing. They're the reason we have the crops that we do, which I should have said this. GMOs stand for genetically modified. My gosh, I can't talk today. Genetically modified organisms. And they allow the crops that we have to have very desirable traits so we can produce more for less land and less money. It's a very helpful, sustainable approach to the food that we're putting on the table. So canola is one of the GMOs. So that claim is true. And a lot of these claims do have some truth to them, but at the surface level, it seems scary. But if you dig deeper, that's when you realize that the claim has a lot of flaws behind it.
Yeah. This starts falling to the camp of like, if, our ancestors didn't do it, then it wasn't right. And even that claim, like, you go pretty far back in human history, like we have early processing of food and creation of like flour and things like that quite far in our history. But even if you go way back to our hunter-gatherer days, before farming, before processing, et cetera, people think if you don't eat like that, then that's a problem for your body. And that goes to the whole thing I mentioned with like our conversation and the conversation I had with Emily of like thinking that the human body is weak and can't adapt. But also those foods can have a better nutrient profile. They can be tastier. They can have more calories, which if you're in, growing up or in a country where you may not have access to food, it's going to be beneficial to have a bigger food, a bigger fruit or vegetable, a more nutrient dense, protein, whatever you're having. It makes food more readily available. It makes it have a longer shelf life. So it's all positive things that we as humans through technology have been able to innovate and make better. That doesn't mean that it is a bad thing in of itself.
Exactly. It just sounds scary. I mean, genetically modified organism. Ooh, it's got some like Halloween vibes behind it, but it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. I think that omega-6 sounds pretty scary too. Or gosh, what's another example? Amino acid, phenylalanine, like all these things like sound really fake and made up and sciencey and scary, but a lot of times, have you seen the banana meme? Like the ingredient list of the banana, that's just like all the chemicals that are in it.
You read my mind. I was just going to say on the very first, I think it was podcast number 2, the very first one we did, we were talking about like how people say chemicals are bad for you. It's like, well, number one, everything's chemicals. So what are you saying? Like, oh, well, no, the mixture of certain chemicals is like, well, if you can't pronounce it, don't eat it. It's like the common trope as well. It's like, if you read the ingredients in banana or coffee, you're not gonna be able to pronounce them and it's going to sound very scary, but that's just what they're named. Like it's just the chemical. You're chemicals. Precisely. You're made of chemicals. Like what do you want?
Everything's chemicals. Yeah.
Everything. So that makes sense from the chemical argument where people are like, GMO, there's chemicals, it's harming your body. It's like, probably not, man. Just carry on with life.
Carry on. And again, the dose. Like, yes. Are you just eating GMOs 24/7? Probably not. That's not how our food processing works.
Absolutely.
Well, we got one more, but that one we kind of already debunked. And that's the whole claim of the animal fats versus the seed oils. And again, I would be happy to be proven wrong. But the saturated fats, we have a really firm body of evidence that supports that those can increase risk of heart disease, high cholesterol levels, all of that. So we do want to eat less of those and more of even the seed oils. Those could be a totally fine option to replace the butters, the cheeses, that kind of thing in excess quantities.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's my understanding, not only from like my education and nutritional classes, but just, and again, I'm open to like seeing papers or conversations about that, but time and time again, it seems like, and I'm not like pro-vegan, like I love eating animals. I love having animal product in my diet. It's good source of protein, good source of nutrients, but it seems like excess, especially saturated fat-based content from like red meat, etc., in your diet overall tends to have a negative health outcome long-term in life. And when you do replace said, negative ingredient in exaggeration with these ingredients that we talk about, like canola, flaxseed, olive oil, etc., we see nothing but positive changes across all dimensions. So I felt like the case is closed for a while now, but people keep fighting back and pushing against it for some reason.
Yeah, I think they just like want to fight sometimes. Can't we all just like get along and agree on all these different things, especially if we do have solid evidence? It's just so frustrating.
But then what would we talk about, Hannah? What would you and I?
We'd be out of jobs.
We would. So I guess it keeps the fight interesting for us here on the platform.
That's true.
Well, cool. Well, I learned some cool things today. I did a little RDD backup on some of this cool information. So thank you so much, Hannah, for taking the time to go over kind of these, I'll call it myth debunking on the seed oil side and on the carnivore diet side. Always a pleasure having you on. If you want to plug anything, please let the people know where they can find you. Anything you got coming up, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I always love debunking. It's kind of like why I became a dietitian, I think, but there's just so much information out there that I guess someone's got to do it.
That's right.
But if you want to hear more debunking, we have our podcast, the Up-Beet Dietitians, that Damien has been on a couple times. We'll have to have you back on for who knows what. We have like a whole slew of resident personal trainers that we love having on, and they're all from Purdue, including Damien.
Yes.
So check out our podcast. You can also find me on mostly TikTok and Instagram is where I hang out at Dietitian Hannah. I post there very, very frequently. And I do also have my membership, which is kind of like the next step up from social media if you kind of just want to consume even more of my content. So in the membership, I do monthly live trainings. We have a book club where we're reading like anti-diet books. We read one, actually, we had a meeting today, our book club meeting today. But last month we read, what was it called? Oh my gosh, I literally just read it this month. Oh, Fat Politics. It's all about like the obesity epidemic and how that came to be. And is that even a thing? So we do, anyway, a monthly book club in there. I have like exclusive podcast episodes, new recipes every week. So that's kind of the main hub for anyone who wants to just kind of help have me as a person to bounce ideas off of further than just social media.
Yes, and I'll be sure to link all those things. Like I said, I've consumed a lot of Hannah's content, especially on the TikTok and podcast side. If you're looking for some educational, science-based, RD-based information, would highly recommend checking it out. So I'll be sure to put all those links down in the description below. Y'all know where to find me. If you're new here, it's at @the_shift_method for TikTok and Instagram. We got posts going out almost every single day. Of course, every single week on Mondays, we have either a podcast coming out or a fitness-based video that is on my YouTube channel. Just search The Shift Method. You'll find it there. Podcasts you can find on major platforms, primarily Spotify, but also Apple Podcasts as well. You can go to shiftmethod.org. You can get some merch, any Shift Method apparel, as well as if you're looking for some coaching. Hey, look at that. I didn't see the hair in the way. Let's go. I appreciate it so much. So yeah, you can get some cool shirts like Hannah and I. Or if you're interested in some coaching options, you can click any of the take action buttons. I'll be able to help you out. And lastly, as I mentioned over the last few weeks, since this is going out on January 2nd, it's your boy's birthday. It's also International Personal Trainer Awareness Day. So thank you to Hannah and thank you to all my awesome trainers out there. But I am releasing custom training programs on Train Heroic. My time is kind of limited right now. I'm sure Hannah can relate to that. We're very busy. And so I'm finding ways to bring affordable automated coaching to people who might be interested in wanting to work with me or work with the Shift Method. These programs are 8 weeks long and you get access to them for an entire calendar year on the Train Heroic app. So it has exercise demonstrations. It has weekly videos from me updating you on what's going on to keep you accountable and motivated. And it also has some notes for you to go through and really good data tracking. So the 4 programs that are going to be available on January 2nd through the Train Heroic Marketplace are fitness. So it's a general fitness program. Weight loss, if you're looking to improve your body composition and your energy and mood, a hypertrophy training program, and a squat, bench, deadlift training program if you're a power lifter. So all 4 of those will be available for purchase on the app. I'll be sure to put a link in the description on where you all can get those. And if you're interested, please consider getting it. But otherwise, Hannah, thank you so much again. I hope you have a wonderful day and a happy new year. And I'll hopefully see you soon in 2023.
Yes. Thank you for having me. Bye, guys.
Yeah. Later, everyone.